The first strike came not with words but with fire. The council chamber, once a sanctuary of diplomacy floating in orbit above a neutral star, erupted into chaos as the alien delegates of the Vey'thar Confederacy unleashed their blades and plasma into the heart of the gathering. The target was clear: Ambassador Marcus Hale, Earth's chosen voice in the galactic chorus. They cut down aids, shredded protocols, and shattered centuries of ceremony with a single order. Hale fell beneath their blows, his last words drowned out by the hiss of alien steel. Humanity's first diplomat to the stars was gone, his blood pooling on a floor once meant for peace. The galaxy had underestimated Earth before, but never like this. The Vey'thar thought they could silence a voice with violence. What they had not accounted for was the storm that would follow. Humanity had endured empires, plagues, and wars of annihilation long before the Vey'thar had learned to crawl from their oceans. And for every man they struck down, Earth would rise tenfold in fury. Word traveled fast, through encrypted channels, through desperate survivors, through broken fragments of broadcast. Within hours the footage reached Earth. Billions watched in stunned silence as the images burned into their minds. Hale standing tall, then falling, cut down without mercy. For a brief moment the world felt the weight of grief. Then in that silence something ancient awoke. General Adrian Corr, commander of the Terran Defense Fleet, stood in the war room, his jaw tight, his voice low but unyielding. "They think they've broken us," he said, eyes fixed on the holographic replay. "What they've done is remind us who we are." Around him, admirals and strategists leaned forward. Some carried rage in their eyes, others sorrow, but all felt the same truth: Earth could not let this pass. Not because of Hale alone but because of what it meant. To allow the Vey'thar's slaughter to go unanswered would be to declare humanity weak, to bow before fear. And if the galaxy believed humans were prey, the predators would circle forever. The order came swiftly, without hesitation. Mobilize the fleet. Sanctions, diplomacy, those will come later. For now we strike. Let the galaxy remember why humanity has always been feared in its own wars. The Terran Defense Fleet lit up the void, ships tearing free of their berths with a hunger not seen in generations. Every pilot, every marine, every captain knew this was more than retaliation. It was a message. Hale had stood for peace and he had been slain. Now Earth would stand for vengeance. But vengeance alone would not win. The Vey'thar were not a scattered enemy, they were a confederacy of warlords, centuries hardened, with fleets spanning systems. They expected Earth to hesitate, to drown in grief or bureaucracy. What they did not expect was how fast humans could adapt. What they did not expect was the unity born of fury. Captain Darius Vale of the TDS Resolute sat at the heart of the armada. Young for his rank but hardened by wars on Earth's colonies, he understood the stakes better than most. "This isn't just about Hale," he told his crew as the fleet broke atmosphere. "This is about every world watching to see if humanity kneels." "We don't kneel. Not now, not ever." The crew answered with silence first, then with the pounding of fists against consoles, a rhythm that carried through the ship like a heartbeat. When the fleet accelerated into FTL, every man aboard knew they were writing history in fire and iron. As the Resolute and her sister ships streaked toward Vey'thar space, whispers rippled across the galactic community. Some species trembled at the thought of Earth's retaliation. Others scoffed, convinced that humanity was too young, too fragile, too reckless. But a few, those who had studied human history, leaned back in their chairs and muttered grimly, "The Vey'thar have no idea what they've unleashed." The first clash came at the border world of Drask, a mining colony turned fortress by the Vey'thar. Its orbit bristled with defense satellites, its skies swarmed with patrol craft. When Earth's fleet dropped from FTL, alarms blared across the system. The Vey'thar commanders expected Earth to posture, to threaten, to demand reparations. Instead they saw fire. The Resolute surged forward, railguns roaring, plasma lances slicing through the void. Human tactics, brutal, precise, unpredictable, shattered the Vey'thar formation. What took other species years to plan, humans improvised in minutes. When the enemy expected retreat, Vale ordered a charge. When they braced for bombardment, he ordered boarding actions. Marines and powered exosuits stormed Vey'thar ships, their war cries echoing through comms. "For Hale!" they shouted, their rifles blazing. In the corridors of alien vessels, the Vey'thar met humanity not as diplomats, not as negotiators, but as warriors born of a violent world. Hours later the system fell silent. Drask was in human hands. Messages flooded the galaxy. Earth had not only retaliated, it had conquered. But Vale knew this was only the beginning. Drask was a spark. The real fire was yet to come. The victory at Drask sent shockwaves across the stars. For the first time in centuries, a major Vey'thar stronghold had fallen, not to another galactic power but to the youngest, most underestimated species in the Council. Whispers spread like wildfire, the humans had drawn blood. In the great chambers of the Confederacy, the Vey'thar High warlords gathered. They were titans of war, their bodies encased in ceremonial armor that had seen 1,000 battles. Each one had believed humanity to be soft, their strength buried in words and treaties. Now Drask was gone, and their pride had been wounded before the entire galaxy. "They are savages," snarled Warlord Krex, slamming his clawed fist onto the obsidian table. "They have no restraint, no respect for order. This species of prey dares to bare its fangs at us?" But another warlord, older and more cautious, shook his head. "You forget history, Krex. These humans come from a world where survival was never guaranteed. They rose not by waiting but by fighting. If they have chosen war, it is because they have decided they can win." The chamber erupted in arguments, strategies, and accusations. Yet beneath their noise lingered an unease none of them would voice aloud. Had they awoken something they could not control? Back aboard the Resolute, Captain Vale studied the maps of enemy space with quiet intensity. His fleet had dealt a decisive blow, but it was only the beginning. Every victory risked rallying the Confederacy against them. Humanity had numbers, courage, and ingenuity, but not the vast resources of an empire. They had to fight smart or they would be drowned in alien fleets. General Kor's voice crackled through the command net. "Drask was symbolic, but symbols are not enough. We need the galaxy to understand. Attacking Earth's envoy was not just murder. It was an act of war against a species that will never forgive." Vale nodded grimly. "And we need the Vey'thar to bleed so much they'll wish they had never lifted a blade." The fleet pushed deeper, striking fast and vanishing before the enemy could regroup. Worlds fell not through brute strength alone but through cunning. Human ships faked retreats only to double back and ambush pursuers. They sabotaged supply chains, cut off communication hubs, and spread fear like wildfire. To the Vey'thar, who had always relied on overwhelming force, it was infuriating. To the rest of the galaxy it was terrifying. Stories began to circulate among alien merchants and soldiers, tales of humans who fought without fear, who turned desperation into victory. Some whispered of Marines who kept fighting even when wounded beyond reason, their resolve unbroken. Others spoke of human fleets that seemed to appear from nowhere, striking like predators in the dark. On the third week of the campaign, Vale's fleet cornered a Vey'thar convoy near the moon of Israk. The aliens had fortified the moon's surface with anti-ship cannons, daring humanity to attack. Vale stood before his crew and smiled faintly. "They think we'll fight them in orbit. They think we'll play by their rules. They've forgotten, we write our own." Instead of bombarding from space, Vale ordered a drop. Human Marines, strapped into drop pods, hurtled through the atmosphere like fiery meteors. The Vey'thar watched in shock as hundreds of pods slammed into the ground, hatches exploding open to release armored warriors. The Marines stormed the cannons, cutting through defenses in brutal close combat. Within hours, the guns were silent, and the convoy lay helpless. Vale's fleet swept in, capturing ships intact and seizing supplies desperately needed for the campaign. The victory was clean, decisive, and broadcast across the galaxy. Aliens who had once scoffed now stared at the footage in disbelief. Humanity was not just fighting, they were winning. But victory came at a cost. In the aftermath of Israk, reports of fallen Marines filled the fleet's halls. Vale walked among his men, listening to their stories, sharing their grief. He did not hide the losses, he carried them. And in return, his crew gave him their loyalty, unbreakable and fierce. Late that night, as the fleet regrouped, Vale stood alone in the observation deck. Stars stretched out before him, endless and indifferent. For a moment, he allowed himself to feel the weight pressing on his shoulders. Every choice, every risk, one mistake could doom not just this fleet but Earth itself. A voice stirred behind him. It was Commander Rourke, his oldest friend. "You're carrying too much, Darius. No captain wins a war alone." Vale didn't turn. His eyes remained on the stars. "I don't need to win it alone. I just need to make sure humanity never bows again. If we fall standing." Rourke placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then we'll stand with you. To the end." And so they pressed on deeper into hostile space. Each battle was harder, each victory narrower, but the fire within them never dimmed. For every loss they struck back harder. For every fallen Marine, 10 more rose in his place. Humanity was not just surviving, it was becoming a legend. In alien taverns and council halls, the phrase began to spread: fear the humans. Not because of their weapons nor their numbers, but because they refused to yield. They were a species that turned tragedy into strength, pain into fury, and war into art. And deep within the Vey'thar Confederacy, Warlord Karesh clenched his claws and roared before his armies. If they want war, then war they shall have. We will drown their worlds in fire. But even he knew, in the quiet corners of his mind, that the humans were no longer prey. They were predators, and they were coming. The campaign pressed deeper into the Vey'thar heartland, but with every victory came heavier resistance. Their fleets grew bolder, their defenses tighter. Yet humanity's fury only sharpened. The galaxy watched with rapt attention. Could Earth's fledgling fleets truly stand against an empire centuries old? For Captain Darius Vale, the answer was found not in numbers but in will. The Vey'thar had resources, ships, and tradition. Humanity had fire. And fire could consume even the strongest fortress. On the 4th month of the campaign, intelligence arrived from deep scouts. The Confederacy had gathered a massive fleet near the world of Karesh. It was a stronghold, a crucible of industry and war, where countless shipyards forged vessels for the Empire. If Karesh fell, the Confederacy would reel. If humanity failed, the war might end in annihilation. General Kor's orders were clear: strike Karesh. Break their pride. The galaxy must see them bleed where they believe themselves strongest. Vale gathered his officers in the dimly lit war room aboard the Resolute. The holographic map bathed their faces in ghostly light. Enemy fleets shimmered in red, Earth's in blue. The disparity was staggering: hundreds of alien warships to humanity's few dozen. Commander Rourke stared at the projection, his brow furrowed. This isn't a battle, Darius. It's suicide. Vale's eyes never left the red tide. No, it's a chance. They expect us to run, to fortify, to play it safe. But if we strike Karesh now, we do what they believe impossible. We don't just win, we shatter the illusion of their invincibility. Another officer, grim-faced Lieutenant Karan, leaned forward. And if we fail? Vale's answer was simple. Then we die as humans should, fighting, not kneeling. Silence settled over the room, heavy but resolute. At last Rourke gave a slow nod. Then let's make them remember us. The plan was daring, reckless, even. Humanity's fleet would not confront the enemy head-on. Instead, they would drive directly into the shipyards, threading through the defensive net with speed and precision, tearing out the heart of the Vey'thar war machine in a single strike. Every calculation said it was madness. Every human instinct said it was necessary. When the fleet dropped from FTL above Karesh, alarms howled across the system. Vey'thar admirals scrambled to deploy their vast armada, confident in overwhelming numbers. But the humans didn't flinch. Engage, Vale ordered. The Resolute and her sister ships lunged forward, weaving between defensive fire with impossible maneuvers. Where alien vessels advanced in rigid formations, human captains improvised, adapting in real time. Railguns roared, plasma arcs cut through the void, and boarding pods streaked like comets toward the shipyards. The battle became chaos. Vey'thar commanders, trained in centuries of doctrine, struggled to predict the humans' movements. One moment, the Terran fleet feigned retreat. The next, they carved through a flank with brutal precision. The galaxy had always seen humans as unpredictable, and here, unpredictability became a weapon. Amid the storm, Vale stood unshaken at the command deck. Every decision was a gamble, every maneuver a razor's edge. Yet his crew followed him without hesitation. For them, he was not just a captain. He was the embodiment of Earth's defiance. On the surface of Karesh, Marines poured from drop pods, striking at the massive shipyards. Towers of steel and fire stretched for kilometers, each one a monument to the Confederacy's dominance. Now they became battlefields. Humans and exosuits fought street by street, tearing apart the infrastructure that had fed Vey'thar conquest for centuries. Warlord Karesh himself arrived in orbit aboard his flagship, a beast of a vessel bristling with weapons. His voice thundered across the comms, dripping with contempt. Human vermin. You crawl into the heart of the Confederacy as if you belong here. I will crush you myself and scatter your bones to the void. Vale's lips curled into a grim smile. Then come and try. The duel was inevitable. The Resolute faced Karesh's Leviathan in the center of the battle, a David against Goliath moment broadcast across the galaxy. Every alien eye watched, waiting for the humans to finally break. The Leviathan opened fire, torrents of plasma carving space into ribbons. The Resolute twisted and weaved, shields screaming under the strain. Vale barked orders with the calm of a man who had accepted death long before he entered battle. Target their weak points. Don't match them strength for strength, bleed them where they think themselves invulnerable. Salvos tore into the Leviathan's armor. At first it was like throwing stones at a mountain. But stone by stone the mountain cracked. The Resolute darted close, far closer than doctrine allowed, weaving under the giant's guns, striking engines, sensors, exposed seams. The battle raged for hours. Marines destroyed shipyards below while the Resolute danced with a monster above. Losses mounted, but so did victories. And then, in a single blinding moment, the Leviathan faltered. One of its engines erupted in fire, the ship listing as systems cascaded into failure. On the comms, Karesh roared in fury. You think this is victory? You're gnats. Nothing more. Vale stared at the burning flagship, his voice cold as steel. Then you've just been stung. The Resolute's final salvo tore through the Leviathan's core. The explosion lit the void, a supernova of fire and ruin. Warlord Karesh, scourge of dozens of worlds, was gone. The galaxy gasped. Humanity had not only struck Karesh, they had slain a warlord. But as cheers erupted across the fleet, Vale knew the war was far from over. For every Karesh a dozen more waited. And while humanity had proven its fury, the Confederacy would never forgive the humiliation. Still, in that moment as the fires of Karesh burned bright, the legend of humanity grew. A species that could not be silenced. A people who turned tragedy into fury and fury into victory. And across alien worlds whispers grew louder, fear the humans. The wreckage of Karesh smoldered across the stars, a graveyard of ships and shattered pride. The Confederacy's once proud flagship lay broken, its carcass drifting silently in orbit. Across the galaxy news feeds blazed with the impossible. Warlord Karesh was dead, slain not by rivals, not by age but by humans. For the first time in centuries the Vey'thar Confederacy bled. But victory brought no rest. Captain Vale knew the enemy would rally, driven not just by vengeance, but by the need to erase the humiliation humanity had inflicted. The fall of Karesh was more than a battle, it was a wound carved into the very heart of their empire. And wounds demanded answers. The Terran fleet regrouped at the edge of the system, battered but unbroken. Losses were high, ammunition low, yet the fire in their eyes burned brighter than ever. Marines returned from the ruined shipyards, their armor scorched, their numbers thinned. They carried scars but also trophies, symbols that Earth had dared to strike where no other species would. Vale walked among them, meeting their gazes one by one. He offered no empty promises, no platitudes of easy victory. Instead he said the only words that mattered. You've made the galaxy remember us. And whatever comes next they will never forget. The men answered not with cheers but with silence, a silence heavy with resolve. Within days the Confederacy gathered its forces. Dozens of fleets converged, an armada vast enough to blot out the stars. Warlords vied for command but rage united them. They would crush the humans in a storm of fire, wipe them from the map, and show the galaxy that defiance had a price. Vale knew the truth, humanity's fleet could not win in open battle. Not against such numbers. But he also knew something the Vey'thar could never understand. Humanity did not fight wars to the last ship. They fought to the last breath. The final stand came at the barren world of Drask, a nameless rock at the edge of Confederacy space. There Vale lured the armada into a trap born of desperation and brilliance. Mines hidden in the asteroid belt, decoys disguised as warships, and marines stationed in concealed outposts, all prepared for one purpose, to bleed the enemy dry. As the Vey'thar armada advanced, confident in their overwhelming might, the stars themselves seemed to explode. Asteroids shattered, mines tore through formations and human ships struck from impossible angles. Chaos reigned. Yet even with cunning and courage the battle tilted toward annihilation. The Resolute groaned under the weight of damage, its shields failing, its weapons overheating. One by one human ships fell, their final transmissions carried on waves of static and fire. Vale stood at the heart of the storm, his face lit by the glow of burning systems. Around him the bridge crew worked with quiet fury, every man willing to follow him into death if it meant Earth's survival. Status? Vale asked. Outnumbered 10-1, Rourke answered grimly. But they're bleeding. Vale's eyes hardened. Then we bleed them more. The battle stretched for hours, then days. The Confederacy had expected a slaughter. Instead they found themselves locked in a nightmare. Every system lost cost them ships, every maneuver turned into a trap. The humans would not break. And then, at the height of the chaos, A transmission cut across the battlefield. Not from Vale nor from any human fleet, but from a neutral observer broadcasting to the entire galaxy. "Here is your proof," the voice said. "The humans fight not for conquest but for survival. They face annihilation yet they do not yield. Watch closely, for this is the measure of their kind." The feed showed Vale on the Resolute's bridge, battered but unbowed, commanding with a voice like iron. It showed Marines fighting hand to hand in burning corridors, refusing to retreat. It showed a species outmatched in numbers but unmatched in will. And as the galaxy watched, something shifted. For the first time, whispers of respect joined the chorus of fear. At last, battered and bloodied, the Confederacy broke. Not from lack of ships nor lack of weapons, but from something far more insidious: doubt. The warlords had promised an easy victory, yet the humans had carved them apart with every breath. To continue was to invite ruin. The order to retreat spread through the armada. Reluctant, furious but undeniable, the Vey'thar fled. When the smoke cleared, only a handful of human ships remained. The Resolute drifted, scarred and crippled but alive. Vale stood upon its shattered bridge, staring at the wreckage of a battle that should have ended in extinction. Instead, it had ended in legend. Reports flooded across the galaxy. The humans had stood against an empire and lived. They had answered violence with fury and fury with victory. They had carved a name for themselves in blood and fire. General Kor's message to Earth was brief but unyielding. Ambassador Hale was slain, but his voice carries still. The galaxy now knows: to strike humanity is to invite destruction. We are no longer whispers on the edge of the stars. We are here. And we are not afraid. In the years that followed, the Confederacy would rebuild and new threats would rise. But the memory of Karesh, of Drask, of the humans who refused to kneel, would linger forever. And among the stars, one phrase became etched into history: fear the humans.